Hi, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of the Collective Intelligence podcast. Today, I'm joined by Dash Glitch, another YouTube content creator. He specializes in music production and sound design. And we've got about an hour and a half of a conversation that we recorded that you can enjoy. Before we get into it, there's going to be a little jingle that plays. Today's jingle was submitted by Absolute Truth Seeker. He's one of the members on the Discord. If you'd like to have your jingle featured on the Collective Intelligence podcast as some intro music, send it through to feedback@collectiveintelligencemusic.com, title it with jingle, and I'll feature it on one of the podcast episodes. Thanks, guys. I hope you enjoy the conversation, and I'll talk to you soon. This is the first Collective Intelligence podcast, and I am honored to have you as the first guest. So obviously I understand how I discovered you and the way that I have learned a lot from you. So I'm going to just set out by putting it on the table and saying basically all of my sound design is thanks to your tutorials. So thank you so much for all of the tutorials that you have made. The YouTube algorithm put your videos in front of me, and it has been super transformative to my music production, and I know a lot of other people around the world. But a lot of my viewers actually maybe don't know you already. So Dash, do you want to take a bit of time to explain who you are and what you're about?
Sure. First, thank you. I'm honored to be held in such high regard by somebody like yourself. I think it's testament to the power of online networking and stuff to be able to, we kind of were not connected in any way in terms of we probably had no friends that were friends of friends, but yet still the YouTube algorithm was like, hey, Andrew, you probably want to watch this video. Mm-hmm. And it started a whole kind of thing. I think that's testament to kind of where music, or at least the community around music is going. I think it's quite a beautiful thing. And it's one of the reasons I think why I kind of got into doing what I do. So basically I'm Dash Glitch. I'd say I'm a sound designer, music tutorial creator on YouTube. I spend most of my days creating random sounds for different synthesizers and making YouTube videos. I do post weekly. So generally every Friday, new tutorial videos. So definitely go check out my videos. I think I'm honored to have been invited onto the Collective Intelligence podcast. I too have been watching your channel for a very long time, so it's cool to finally connect.
How did you discover Collective Intelligence? What was your first encounter with that? Was it through the algorithm as well, or?
Yeah, well, I think I had seen, because a lot of the time what I do is if I'm going to post a video, I want to see what topics have already been covered and mm-hmm. maybe try pose the title of the video in a slightly different way, if that makes sense. Yep. So, for example, if somebody says how to get fat sounding drums, then I'll do a similar video, but I'll say how to get tight sounding drums or whatever. But the outcome might be similar, or, I just try to pose it in a slightly different manner because, often on YouTube you get you search kick and bass and there's 100 different things to choose from and it's just overwhelming.
Yeah.
So
much
often I'll be posting videos and I'd see your videos pop up all the time whenever I'd searched my stuff. So in my head, I always kind of knew that you were there, but I didn't get a chance to actually just go and watch. Mm-hmm. And then I think the algorithm was it had known that you'd come up in so many searches that you just started popping up in my recommended videos when you were live and stuff. So I was like, okay, yes, this is definitely what I want to watch, because you're live and stuff.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah, that's kind of how it started,
Oh, so it was mostly with the live streaming.
I think so. I think Well, I think back then I'd kind of like watched. I think you did like a kick or a baseline tutorial as well.
Yep.
And so I'd watched a couple of those, but I don't think I'd actually like actively engaged with the channel.
Yep.
Yeah, until I saw you streaming. I think for me, watching, I like to watch more streams than I do produced content.
Yep.
I guess because I produce so much videos that I kind of get bored of like the thing. I like to see people like on the spot, like, you know, what's he gonna say if he's like up to the challenge and something goes wrong, you know? Kind of stuff.
Actually, I do remember as well, like are you still a moderator or an admin for the Psytrance Producer Forum, or were you ever, or am I just making that up?
Yeah, so I was for quite some time.
Yeah.
But
so actually,
after a while, yeah.
That's probably the first time I actually saw you anywhere. But that was long before I ever knew you made videos. So anyway, sorry to interrupt you. Carry on.
Yeah, so the admin thing, it was like, I felt like it was kind of like taking the passion of music away from things, because I was doing that kind of before creating the videos and stuff. And then I started creating the videos, and a lot of people in the group started thinking that like my ideas started getting biased because of plugin manufacturers that were like bribing me or whatever. And the tone that people were talking to me had kind of like completely changed the moment I started posting videos online. Yeah, totally. And then if I tried to post videos into the group in response to questions that people were having, then people would complain like, oh, he's just using this group to promote himself. And
shit. Okay, well,
let me rather just step down and I mean, it's not like it was a problem, because I mean, like, there were still so many good people in that forum, and it's still a great forum, and I'm still there, and I'm still active in the forum. But it's just like, I think as an admin, people like expect you to be completely like to see both sides of every story. But I mean, I'm still allowed an opinion. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's quite a funny story, actually. But coming back to, obviously, sound design is how I first really connected with your teaching, and I want to know a little bit about your background of sound design. Where did it start? Did it start on hardware? Did it start in the box? Like, what's the background there?
Well, I guess like if we go like really, really far back, it started like when I was really young. I think probably like 8 years old or so. My dad was really into synths, and he was in a couple of bands, and he played keyboards, and so there was always like equipment around the house. So I'd always like sneak in there and make weird siren noises and like record it to tape, and then stretch the tape and kind of see how it sounds, and like run things through like graphic EQ several times and record it again and that kind of stuff. So I guess like early on, I was kind of instilled this idea of like, try to do as much as you can with as little as possible. Mm-hmm. And I think that was probably the most important like development in my sound design, because like the moment I was kind of after that I was like, it's weird noises, this would never be used in the context of music. And I started getting more into like actual like playing drums for bands and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But eventually realized like, I think my passion was more for just the weird noises and sitting like, you know what I mean? Recording weird sounds and dubbing them over tapes and all sorts of stuff. So I started experimenting with Fruity Loops, and I was quickly like, okay, this is it. You know, this is exactly what I want to do.
Fruity Loops.
I'm not so interested. Yeah, totally. I did start on Fruity Loops.
Sweet.
And even like then, just experimenting with the basic stuff, just trying to twist every knob and figuring out what is the sound of FM, or what is the sound of this, and what does a filter do. And I think at the time people were like, oh, dude, you should get Cubase, or you should get this. And I was like, well, I just want to figure all this out first. And I think that was kind of like the most powerful development. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, yeah.
No, keep going.
So then after a little while, I kind of got a little bit annoyed with Fruity. I think at that stage I was still using the demo, so I couldn't save anything. So it was like, I would just tweak sounds, record it onto a tape deck, and then listen to it tomorrow kind of thing. And then the next day, just record, tweak, and then record it to a tape deck. And I got kind of so pissed off with that whole mentality that I couldn't save things. And, obviously back then I was still a child, so I didn't have money. So I went onto the internet and found a crack of Cubase. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that, but I'm honest about it. Like, we all started somewhere, and being a South
do you
African,
own Cubase now?
I do, absolutely. Yeah.
There
I've
you
owned
go.
it for
All
over
good.
a decade. So, yeah.
Yep.
I own every piece of software that I use now. So it's. I think if I hadn't had the chance to try Cubase back then I probably wouldn't have bought it now, because I already had known it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it's a powerful thing. As much as I don't agree with people like pirating software, I think if there is no ability to pay for it and the person is passionate about it, I think it can open doors. And that's why I think, companies like Reaper and those that do that kind of like nag screen type thing, I really appreciate those kind of companies, because they kind of put it in your hands. They say, are you using it commercially? Then think about paying.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Yeah.
So anyway, I found Cubase and started experimenting with Albino 3, made like a ton of sounds, saved them as presets, and I started giving them around to friends and stuff. And then I started hearing them like in people's tracks, and I was like, wait a sec, like, this is actually a thing. I could develop sound packs and sell them. I guess it kind of took quite a long time to get to the point where I was actually making commercial sound packs, but that kind of like inspired me to like focus more on creating sounds that other people can use, because I enjoyed like I guess it's kind of like hearing a DJ play your track, but there's so many different ways and contexts that people can use a sound that it's super inspiring to hear it,
How long ago was that you like first sort of heard your sounds in other people's tracks? Was that like 10 years ago? Or?
Yeah, that was it was probably over a decade ago.
Okay, wow.
It was so when I was still starting playing gigs and stuff, so it was probably in the sort of 2009, 2010 sort of era, I would say.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And obviously, like, from the beginning, were you interested in psychedelic music and psychedelic sounds, or did you have like a background of liking different music and then moving into this genre? Or
so, like, at very first, like when I first started experimenting with things, I was kind of more into hip hop and trip hop and that kind of stuff. Then I started getting, when I started playing drums in bands, I started getting more into like metal and punk and that kind of stuff. But then, as I kind of discovered synthesis more and started experimenting with music, I started getting into Spangle, and that was kind of like the door between normal music and the psychedelic world, because I started hearing all these weird sounds, like stuff that I had imagined being made on these old synths and weird tape decks that I was using. And I started hearing them, but in the context of normal music. And I was like, wait a sec, I thought this was impossible. I thought people just want guitars and drums, I didn't know people want these weird sounds. And soon after that, like, I had a bunch of friends who were going to a trance party, and they actually forced me to go, because I was like, no, I'm not into the doof doof. I think at that point, like, I was still listening to the music on very bad quality speakers. So I wasn't hearing the full stereo and high frequencies, and I was just hearing that sub, and I was like, no, not my vibe. And they literally like pushed me into the car, closed the doors, and went, and it was the time of my life. I got back, opened Fruity Loops, and I like literally tried to make Psytrance tracks for weeks straight.
And that was in Cape Town. You're based in Cape Town, yeah? Yeah.
And I can't even remember the year. Probably it was a New Year's Vortex, I think about 2003.
Oh, shit.
That was like my first ever experience with Psytrance, I think it was.
It always blows my mind, because I'm such a late comer to it, that like people experience Psytrance when they're in their like teens and that sort of thing. It wasn't until I was like 24 or 25 that I come across Psytrance. So yeah, that blows my mind. That's really cool.
Well, I wasn't legally allowed to be at the festivals. Let's just put it that way. So I kind of was a bit bigger than a lot of my peers at the time, so I could get away with that kind of thing.
And what sort of other like bands or artists outside of Psytrance have had quite an influence on you?
I'm very into Tool, Perfect Circle, More the electronic side of stuff. People will probably hate me for this, but I love Deadmau5. I think he's absolutely inspirational.
Yeah, fantastic.
I don't like a lot of the types of music that he creates, but in terms of sound design, I think he's really great. And you can hear his inspirations in so much electronic music across the board, in dubstep, in everything. So I think he's a really inspirational artist. And also his way that he can kind of change. He can do like something more down tempo and then something more, and it's always, you can hear it's him. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. Why
Why
would you preface that maybe people wouldn't be so happy to hear that you like Deadmau5? That's an interesting question.
Yeah, it is an interesting question. It probably goes down to something that I do want to talk about. Is I think people have this notion that success equals being a sellout, as opposed to working hard equals success. And I think Joel Deadmau5 is the perfect example of not being a sellout, because he owns his music. Like, no labels are telling him what to make. He makes exactly what he wants to make, and he's loving life. And I think it's so weird when kind of people, especially like small psytrance artists that are on like a shitty label that aren't giving them any money and they're not paying any gigs, and they point the finger and say, that guy's a sellout. It's like, but why? You're not enjoying what you're doing. Why is his story, you know what I mean? So it's one of those things where like I tend to preface when I mention things like that, and Vinny Vici as well is a classic one.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost as though people just like to hate either what's popular or hate somebody who's getting the attention that maybe they want for themselves.
Yeah. Well, I think it's, I understand why, like, you know, there's obviously like tonal factors to it. You know, you might not enjoy Vinny Vici's music, and I get that, you know. I don't necessarily enjoy it, but I think that their previous project, Sesto Cento, was one of my favorites. But I appreciate...
didn't know they had another project.
Oh yeah, man, they Sesto Cento. Go listen to their stuff. It's some of the top like melodic, full on from back in the day.
Cool.
Like really great like synth patterns, and I've actually done a video like breaking down one of their synth patterns, and it like changes keys, and it's super complex actually.
Sick. Okay, cool.
But I think they're testament to the fact that, like, you know, maybe they changed their style, but they're still happy to be doing what they're doing, and there's no label telling them to change their sound. It's just they know what people want.
Yeah.
Why is there anything wrong with that?
Yeah, I mean, they deliver. Like, it's always a tough thing as an artist when you start to realize, okay, I could make something that I know is going to be popular with other people, but maybe that's not necessarily like a true artistic expression of you know what you genuinely are when you become an artist. So yeah, I've had conversations about that, in particular with my partner who's a visual artist, and she kind of gets a gauge of, okay, well, people want to see this, but I want to make this. And she has a hard time navigating that territory. Have you ever felt like that? Have you ever been sort of conflicted with that?
I guess I kind of like break it into two different kind of things. You know, if I'm producing music, I try to go for what I want to do, because I feel like, you know, when you see somebody like Deadmau5 making their music or playing their music live, they're having the time of their life. You know what I mean? They really enjoy hearing that music or playing that music live to crowds of people. And I think like people feed off the fact that the music is purely what that person wants to make. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So for me, like when I'm playing, I'm enjoying hearing my music more than I'm enjoying other people dancing to it. I'm enjoying the whole experience of hearing it on a massive system, and it's the kind of like, it's like the cherry on top for this project that I've been building for so long, you know. And I think that excitement feeds into the crowd. They're like, yo, look how excited that dude is, you know, and then they start getting excited. And I think there's a lot to do with that as well, in terms of like the crowd experience, you know. I think people in the audience aren't sitting there listening like, is this 148? I shouldn't be liking this yet, you know, or is this triplets? I shouldn't like this, you know. they feeding off other people's energies, and
Yeah, your average punter is definitely feeling that, and that's why when I talk about like performing live, I think that a huge amount of it, or your is your stage presence, like how you present yourself on stage, and whether you're having you're obviously having a good time, or the way that you present yourself in front of your music. And I think that having obviously self-confidence is one of the keys to having a compelling performance. Because if you see somebody up there and they're clearly not that comfortable in front of everybody, it doesn't always come across that well.
Absolutely. And it's clear to see if there's a person there who's making music that they don't want to make, it's going to come through. They're not going to be dancing. They're not going to be enjoying themselves.
Yeah. I guess that authenticity just is pretty transparent. We were talking the other day about like the square bass movement and that style of music, and artists that all seem to be kind of aligning themselves and going in that direction. So I feel like that would be an interesting question to pose to some of those artists. Are they doing that because they feel like that's really a vessel for their future artistic expression? Because I guess I can speak to that, because I love lots of different types of electronic music, but I specifically chose to write psytrance because I felt like the message that I wanted to kind of transmit through the music was best done through psytrance, and the people that would be most receptive to it was most likely to be a psytrance dance floor. Because I felt like, the cliches of like open-mindedness and connectedness and spirituality was really what appealed to me. So that's what attracted me to psytrance. Is that a similar kind of story to what attracts you to the genre?
Yeah, I guess it was a kind of like, for me, there was kind of that kind of idea of these strange sounds being allowed in music, and that kind of pulled me towards being interested in it, or at least into stuff like Spangle and the more psychedelic side of things. But then only going to a festival and experiencing it firsthand, I think my mind was opened, and I was like, wow, if they could change such a stubborn motherfucker, then I was completely against doof music. Like, dude, I'm telling you, like, I hated it all, and that was one of the turning points in my life, was that festival. So my whole thing was like, if this can change me, then like imagine the power of like myself doing this, or thousands of other people getting interested in this. Change the whole world. It's crazy.
Do you often think about the computer screens that you're on right now all around the world? And how does that make you feel when you think about really the impact or the reach that your videos have?
It's a weird thing, hey? Like, me as a person, I'm usually quite self-conscious. So when I go and perform on stage, it takes me a few minutes to kind of warm up. But I get very like anxious, I get very hectic performance anxiety. So it's weird that I don't really think about those kinds of things, like, oh, how many people are watching me around the world. But I think it's because there's that kind of personal disconnect. Having a YouTube allows me to kind of like, I wouldn't say put on a persona, because I don't really, but it kind of allows me this kind of like personal disconnect where it's not that I have to be there in person to answer all these questions and stuff. I can go to sleep and people can watch me and stuff. So It's become a lot easier for me to, how can I say? It's actually something that's kind of grown my self-esteem a little bit. So now I can actually like converse with crowds of people and that kind of thing much easier. I guess because I've been able to put content out there and a lot of people have watched it.
Are you getting people sort of coming up to you when you're out and about and saying like, whoa, man, I've seen you on YouTube?
Yeah, the weirdest thing actually happened. So it was probably about a year ago, I think, when they were installing fiber in our area. There was a guy ringing the doorbells saying like, hey, this is the company. Do you want to sign up, etc. And as I walk outside, he's like, dude, aren't you Dash Glitch? I'm like, You're the internet fiber installation guy, you know, hook me up with a good price. I got the normal price, but I mean, still, it's cool to like, it was cool to like have somebody that I felt was like so out of, you know what I mean? Like, this is like a normal business day work. And the guy's like, oh, wait, you Dash Glitch. And he's like, oh, yes, you're into Sideruns too, bro.
Amazing. Like, have you had that? I mean, obviously, because of the pandemic, it's kind of difficult. But your videos were popular before the pandemic anyway. But like when you were going to festivals and like just on the dance floor, were you often sort of chatting with people about the videos and people coming up to you and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I mean, I've always kind of been quite a like chatty person at festivals and stuff. So I do enjoy like talking about music and that kind of thing. So often, like when I'm, when I'm on the dance floor, I'll often be like around the edges and stuff, chatting to people. So I've noticed like now, since I've started posting the videos, I get a lot more like people walking up to me and asking me like, oh yes, I saw this video on Serum, but I couldn't find this one parameter. And I'm like, not now, dude. Email me.
It's funny that people just expect you to be that open book at any point in time. That
well, the Serum parameter thing has actually happened so much I can tell it off the top of my head. It's like update to 1.23 and you'll be fine.
So how many parties have you played at? So your music project is called Glitch, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've actually got several. I've got several projects.
Okay, tell me.
Glitch is like my main psytrance project, and then I've got a progressive trance project, which is the Elusive Gluon. I actually started it with somebody else several years ago. Then he moved to Sweden, and so like I'm kind of doing it solo now. Mm-hmm. But geez, I can't tell you how many parties I've played at, man. I've been playing since 2008 was like my first gig, but that was at a pub, like a bar kind of vibe. So it wasn't like a big outdoor festival or anything.
Okay, well, what's the biggest party you've played then?
The biggest would have probably been Origin this past year, or the last time we would have been allowed out. It was like literally a month before the lockdown started. And then I actually had booked another festival for the weekend, which they like started the lockdowns. So like, I was actually literally like packing my shit, getting my set ready, and then they were like, okay, lockdown, so they had to cancel the festival and stuff.
What was the name of that festival?
That was, it's organic. It was an organic. Yeah, Love Project, I think was like the name of the festival. I might be wrong though. It's been so long, dude.
What the hell's a party?
Yeah, exactly.
I've heard of Origin. I've heard of Alien Safari. I think is there a party called Earth Dance? Is that a...
Yeah, there's Earth Dance. Yeah, I played Earth Dance. I played quite a few Alien Safaris. Alien Safaris are generally like my favorite because it's generally more on the psychedelic side of things in terms of the music. So they'll still have like a few progressive acts and stuff, but it'll be more on the kind of more psychedelic side of progressive,
Yeah.
Whereas most of the other parties they'll be kind of this full spectrum thing. Obviously, I love all of it, but I always find the Alien Safaris are a great experience because it's just that kind of more psychedelic festival, if that makes sense.
Yeah, when you say more psychedelic, do you mean typically more like full-on forest, high-tech, like that sort of vibe, or Yeah.
I mean, you don't really get high-tech much these days at the bigger festivals in South Africa, but I mean, I think it was an Alien Safari, which was like one of the first to introduce high-tech at the big festivals here in South Africa and stuff. So
yeah. And what sort of rigs are they using? Is Function One like the sort of main...
That's the standard, the Function
standard.
One. For about a decade, when I first started getting into it, the turbo sound stuff was like the standard.
Yeah.
But then as soon as Function One like became the name around the world, everyone here just invested. Yeah. Well, I think there was one or two companies invested. Now everyone just borrows it, kind of thing.
Okay, right. Yeah. What's the best outdoor rig that you've ever heard? Best sounding, like obviously. Yeah. I guess
I'd probably say it was the Function One. I mean, I used to work in the industry, in the sound industry, and then we'd go to like expos where they'd show off like new sound systems and stuff. but often it wouldn't be in the context of like the music that I enjoy or something like that. So it's hard to gauge like the quality of the sound system and stuff like that. So, and it'll often be like a smaller set. So having it like at a festival with good music tuned really well by an engineer, it's, I think, is better than having like the newest, latest, greatest, you know?
Mm-hmm. And have you like had opportunities to sort of attend parties around the world, or you mainly just been to like South African events?
Unfortunately not. No, I haven't had any bookings around the world yet. Now there's like been like a few people sort of interested, but like at the moment it's, you know, I think South Africa's very far behind in the vaccine program. So it doesn't look like I'll be going overseas for at least the next year.
Yeah, it's really such a shame. Have you sort of suffered from the whole pandemic and lockdown situation?
I guess for me, it's been swings and roundabouts, as they say. Like, I kind of lost a few gigs and haven't been able to play festivals in a long time. But at the same time, I think more people being at home, investigating how to be creative and make music and that kind of thing, has seen an increase in views on my channel and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think I'm lucky in that I started doing it before the lockdown. And so by the time that hit, I was already quite well established, and people that were searching how to make music were often going there, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess this really gives us a lot of opportunity to really keep our head down and produce content. And I know that you have just released another Vital preset pack. Yeah, tell me a little bit about your preset packs that you're making, and then we'll talk a little bit about Vital, because Vital's pretty interesting.
Yeah, so there's various sort of like, how can I say, procedures that I take when I'm creating a bank. So I'll either create something which I feel is more of a sequence-heavy bank, so kind of stuff that you can hold one note and things will just happen. You know, just hold a note and create the hook of a track kind of thing. And then on the other side, I try to create more like mega pack type things, which have like kicks, bass sounds, some percussion loop type of things, and like a bit of everything. So I guess before I kind of undertake creating a new bank, I kind of think of the idea of like what's missing from my line of products already. And then what kind of thing I want to create, and what types of things I think would be beneficial to users as well. And then, you know, with like the sequence type of stuff, then what I'll do is I'll sit and I'll make a bunch of LFO shapes, like gate patterns and that kind of thing. So I'll make like 50 different LFO shapes. And then that allows me to sit and make the presets much quicker, because I've kind of cycling through gate patterns and cycling through pitch change thingies and that kind of thing, as opposed to, I guess it's similar to, you know, when you start making a track and you're trying to find a sound to put into that track, looking through presets is often much quicker than trying to fine tune a sound, and often you don't know what you want to put in there and it kind of becomes a mess. So I find like creating a bunch of sort of unique content to pull from, like maybe different wavetables or something like that, then just makes it a bit easier to create these kind of banks, because the inspiration kind of flows from the content that I've already created. So a lot of the time I won't know what type of sound I want to create. I'll just be, I'll put in a gate pattern, put in a pitch pattern, and then change the oscillator shapes, and I'll be like, whoa, that sounds interesting. And then start experimenting with stuff from there, you know. But I mean, sometimes, for example, the Automaton Volume 2 for Serum, I actually posed a question on my social medias, like what melodies people think are like the greatest psytrance melodies and sequences. And then I got a whole bunch of stuff, and then I try to recreate a bunch of those, like exact, you know, melodies and things. So I guess with those kinds of things, like I actually had like direction to work with. But it definitely helps to like create a bunch of unique content before starting to create a bank, you know, like different LFO shapes, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a very interesting process. And that makes a lot of sense. So you obviously mentioned, we started off talking about Vital. You mentioned that you've got Serum Packs. Are there any other synths that you generally make packs for?
Yeah, so I've got a free pack for Faceplant, actually. I released that right at the beginning of lockdown. I was actually planning on creating a bank that was paid for Faceplant, but then things happened with the lockdown, and I figured, you know what, let me release this quickly, because it still had quite a bit of work to do. My idea was 100 Faceplant presets and charge however much dollars. And then I think when the lockdown hit, I had only made, I think, like 20 or 30 different presets. And then so I just like cherry picked a bunch, removed the ones that weren't so great, and just released it for free, because I figured, like, by the time it takes me to finish this, like, you know, it'll probably be good for other people to inspire them. And I think Faceplant is such an underappreciated synth. It's like I wanted to release the pack for free to get people to get into Faceplant, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like from my perspective, looking at it, I'm just such a creature of habit. I'm so bad at just going back to the tools that I already know and I'm already really comfortable with. So Serum has obviously stuck for me because of your videos. And then Vital has been really easy to pick up because it's so similar to Serum, but Faceplant, I have not got beyond that sort of, you know, there's like surface tension. I need to get through that and like really dig deep into it. As of yet, I just haven't done it.
It's intimidating at first, yeah.
So,
but I think like what helped me the most was like I forced myself to do it. What also helps is like, you know, when you get a new synth, is to make packs for the synth. If you're not going to sell them, or if you're going to sell them, it's irrelevant. But to force yourself to make a bunch of different like specific sounds with the new synth, you really start to learn the intricacies of that synth. You know, for example, with Faceplant, the first few weeks I had with it, I was like, okay, let me work out every sound I know, how to recreate it in Faceplant. And I started creating videos about how to do this, how to do that, how to do this. And that process, like, just made it so much more, it like feels like muscle memory now. When I jump into Serum, I start to use the hotkeys that I'm so used to Faceplant now to try and snap the LFO tool and stuff. Like I try Shift and Control, but it's actually Alt, if that makes sense. So now for me, it's like swapped because I've kind of forced myself into that.
Yeah, that's funny. That it would be great if you could remap all the hotkeys so that you could actually have universal hotkeys across all of them. That would be really handy. Yeah. Are there any other synths out there at the moment that are on the radar?
I'm busy trying out this thing called Hyperion.
Yep.
I wouldn't like recommend it yet because I'm not so far deep into it, but it seems really like I'm really enjoying it because there's kind of no frill, if you know what I mean. It's very much like old school Reactor. They didn't spend much time making a fancy GUI. There's no wooden side panels or fancy valve tube pictures and stuff. It's just sliders and knobs, and it's like this whole kind of modular software system. So that's very exciting. I'm thinking of maybe doing some videos on that, but I still got to experiment a little bit more. I'm not quite, you know, I haven't done all the things that I've done before. Like I haven't tried to make a kick drum and that kind of thing with it. So I'm still experimenting, but I'm pretty sure it can do it all. I mean, just judging by the amount of different modules and stuff that it's got in it, looks really, really good.
You've got a really like straightforward approach, well, a very logical approach to learning a new synth. Like when you explained your process with making your Serum preset packs, how you would make all the LFO shapes and that sort of thing. It's something that I'd never really had thought out how I should approach, you know, learning something new or getting really good at using a particular synth. But one thing I do know for certain is that when I did sit down to do my sample pack inside a Serum, that's when I really started to appreciate how much I actually knew and how lazy I was, and I wasn't applying myself all the time to use all of the techniques that I had learned from your videos. Do you find that you have that sort of, I don't know, laziness as well, where you don't always put in 100% of what you actually know to every single patch or every single track, or is this just me?
Well, I guess it depends. If we put in, sometimes putting in too much can destroy the kind of liveliness of a patch or something. So, I mean, for me, a lot of my patches start with a saw wave as a source, and it's just about how the filters and stuff are routed. And you don't necessarily need to create a new wave table for every single sound that you create. You don't need to create like a unique LFO shape. You can use the built-in stuff. That's what it's there for. So I guess it's about, I always like to say that sound design is very much like vocabulary, like speaking a language. If you don't know a certain word and somebody says it to you, you're not going to understand what's going on. And you're also not going to know to use that word in conversation. So the more you kind of experiment with these things, the bigger your vocabulary becomes. And it doesn't necessarily mean that every sentence has to be this like marvel of poetics. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You just use the words when they're appropriate, I guess. And I like to think of sound design very much like that. If you know it all, it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't just have to make a TB303 sound. I mean, that's still one of my favorites.
How much
TB303?
How much time would you spend sort of experimenting versus producing versus making video? Like in an average week, where does the majority of your time go?
I guess it fluctuates. Some weeks I'll have like very deep sort of experimental sessions where I'll just be trying new things. I guess I go through stages where sometimes I'll feel like I've kind of rinsed my content on YouTube and I really need to find something new. Like I've got a video coming up actually, which is like I kind of forced myself to completely think of something like completely different, and I think I came up with something really good. So like I'm stoked about that. But like I've lost my train of thought now.
That's okay. I was asking you about like how much time a week you would spend on experimenting versus
Yes. So like with that, for example, like I spent days trying to figure out like what the thing would be, like, you know what I mean? So it was a lot of thought and then a lot of like picking things up and banging them. I don't want to give away too much, if you know what I mean. And then a lot
subscribe to Dash Glitch for that video.
A lot of processing, and then after a few days I was like, you know what, I can like do this, and I recreated a sound that I do a lot but using a completely different method, if you know what I mean. And it was the result of like experimenting like all the time. But now that sound, it's like, I'm not sure if it's me that like I know what went into that sound, and now every time I hear it I'm like, that sounds good. Well, I'm not sure if it actually does, like there's something different about like the texture or something of the sound. So it's like a weird thing where it's like I spent so much time like experimenting and trying to put together like how I'm going to make this fart sound or whatever it is, you know what I mean? And I could have just synthesized it with a sine wave, but like now I want to go and put it in so many tracks. I want that to be like the signature sound, you know what I mean? But I don't know, like, is it just like me that thinks that it's because of the amount of experimentation that I put in? It's a weird thing. So, but then sometimes, for example, like when I first got Vital, I was able to make like a bunch of videos in a couple of days because I was like, how to make an FM sound. Okay, just FM from B, blah, 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 done. And how to, this and how to that. And so sometimes it comes naturally, especially when I like find new software and that kind of thing, because it'll often be trying to recreate stuff that I know. But then with the kind of more, the weird, like trying to break out the box kind of stuff, often it takes a little while to think of things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, that's something I struggle with massively. Like, obviously, my YouTube channel's viewer base is predominantly Ableton beginner stuff, and they're Ableton oriented, and there's only so much beginner content you can go over before you start rehashing the same ideas. And there's only so many, like, it's kind of difficult, first of all, to teach advanced topics because you kind of just have to learn how to listen to things and know when things apply. And that's sort of just an intuition you gain as you get more experienced. So yeah, I find it very difficult to sort of figure out what the direction of collective intelligence should be now. Like, because you've got such a solid foundation of teaching sound design fundamentals, you're suggesting that you're also having the same sort of problem where you're also looking for something new that you can produce content on, and that doesn't always come easy to you. Have you often thought that you wanted to expand the channel obviously you expanded into modular and you've been doing videos on modular. Has that been well received? Are you thinking about sort of forging a path in another direction that might not be where your viewers were expecting? Or
so I always like to change things up. This is a weird example, but I was watching a video. It's about, I think it was maybe by the creator of Patreon or something, about how to find out what your best next move is and stuff. And he made an example about a guy, like a random YouTuber was just making like random vlog videos and nothing ever stuck. And then he made a video of himself building a box fort, and that got billions of views or something. And then the next day he made another how to make a box fort this color and how to make a box fort that shape and that size. And now every video he's ever done is just how to make a box fort this and that. And it sounds like a weird analogy now, but the thing is, like, he wouldn't have known that his niche is creating things out of boxes if he had just not tried to do that weird experimental thing. You know what I mean? So I always try to like break out the box a little bit, and often it doesn't work. And I'm like, okay, no, carry on with this. You know, like I did the Fiverr thing and I was like, didn't get so many views, got more dislikes than it should have. And so I was like, okay, maybe I shouldn't do that again, you know. But it's also
what
cool
did you
to
do with
see.
Fiverr? Sorry, what did you do with Fiverr?
Oh, so like I made a random like bleeps and bloop noises on my modular and then sent it to a bunch of guys and said like, ghost produce me a track. These are my signature sounds. and then like see what they come up with. So it was pretty interesting. It's not the general type of music that I would like to be listening to, and also not the stuff that's you'd usually see on my channel. But also it kind of gave me an idea, like maybe I shouldn't, because I've always been thinking, should I do sound design tutorials in other genres, like stuff that's more popular? But then when I did this Fiverr thing, a lot of people said, oh, this music sucks, that music sucks. So I was like, maybe my audience doesn't like that type of music. I shouldn't concentrate on that. So using these kind of like breakouts is a great way to be able to like solidify, like, okay, no, I was actually on the right path, you know. And now I know, like, don't break out that far, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So now the next thing is like, it's still what I do, but it's different, you know what I mean?
It's kind of a strange position to be in, where you are sort of walking a balance between what your audience wants to see, what you want to make. I'm finding personally, I find a huge struggle. Obviously, I love my audience, but I've totally made videos that have just really like bombed. Like I like the idea of like actually making like sort of, I don't know, it's a bit cheesy maybe, but like inspirational sort of talking about music, because it's I find it quite a philosophical and psychological topic, and every time I've tried to do that, it's like, nah, people just aren't interested. But that's something that
weird. I seem to get good
want.
reactions from that. Well, I mean, they don't ever get as many views from the videos, but I generally get like only upvotes, like only like thumbs up, no down likes on the stuff that's more motivational and just me speaking. Yeah, it's like, I don't know. I think it's also different audiences want different things, you know. I think maybe the type of audience that is into my stuff, maybe because of the modular thing, maybe a lot of them aren't into production. Maybe they're just here for philosophical reasons. I don't know. You never know what connects people, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have an idea of like what your sort of future plans are with the channel? Do you have like a sort of long-term sort of plan there, or do you just go week by week, video by video?
Nope. My long-term plan. My long-term plan is to get as many subscribers and help as many people as possible. I think the problem with setting big sort of goals is they become overwhelmingly unachievable. So I try to set small goals that I can beat every day, like edit this video. And then by the end of the day, I'm like, I did it. I beat my goal, and then the next day it's like, create a new video. And I'm like, yes, I'm killing this. You know what I mean? Yeah. But if it's like, if you create a goal that's like in 1 month's time, get 100K subscribers, that kind of like notion of thinking, how am I going to do this every single day? It's going to pull you back from being able to get that 100K subscribers,
Yeah. So you kind of take things step by step rather than looking up at the top of the mountain.
Absolutely. And I mean, like I said, like I've actually got another video coming up, which I'm working with a guitarist. I also don't want to give away too much about that, but who knows? That might be the biggest video I ever do, or it might bomb. If it's good, maybe I know, like, should I do more guitar content? Should I learn how to play guitar? You know what I mean? So I don't want to I don't want to paint myself into a corner and then figure out that's where I should have gone. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to take us on a tangent. I've got some questions that I had actually written down, some things that this particular question is very curious to me. How do you find expressing emotion through electronic music?
It's a difficult one. I find often with psytrance in general, I try to put in a lot of like myself into the music through note choice and sound design choice and that kind of thing. And portray a lot of, I would say, emotion in the music. But a lot of the time I find psytrance to be very sterile. But it's weird when you ask different people what they feel about it. Some people, a lot of listeners of psytrance are into it because they want sterile music. They want to just kind of meditate and be free of emotion and that kind of thing, or to the music. I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's, I guess some artists maybe don't put it in, but that might be their strength. But I find like the easiest way to kind of put it in there is to kind of remove things and to try do a little bit more with less. So for example, just minor things like if you have a pad playing at the root note, then right at the end of the bar, just, I've got this bloody fly in my studio. It's annoying me. Every change of season that we have, the flies just go mad here in South Africa.
Are they huge?
Where I stay. No, they're just fucking annoying because I'm close to like the forest and stuff. So
do you want to take a moment to remove it, or?
No, it's all good. It's all good. It's probably the same dude that annoys me every live stream, so people know about him.
What a guy.
What was I going to say?
Do you want me to shoot us on to another topic?
What were we talking about?
Well, we were just talking about like expressing emotion through.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So like if, for example, you have like a pad playing on the root note and like just at the end of the bar, you like move it to a tense note or something. Just a small thing like that can completely change the emotion of a piece or of like a part of a track, or, just adding a different chord in a breakdown or something, it can really do a lot. And I think a lot of people focus too much on trying to make the most cutting edge sounds that they forget to just try, see what happens, And I think it's those experimentations that hit you on another level, because especially for somebody who doesn't know much about music theory, it's hard to determine, okay, this type of thing is going to create this type of feeling or emotion in the music. So for me, it's about just experimenting with what's there already.
Yep.
If you've got like a single note, try to see if it's going to work with a chord, see how different melodies are going to work. And that then results in like, how does this change make me feel? I think music is such a feeling-based thing that I think that's, stop that act of stopping in production and analyzing like, how does this thing make me feel? I think that's done so little nowadays in production. People are just like, okay, this needs FM here, this needs this here. And it's just track finished. People aren't stopping and being like, how does this groove hit me? You know what I mean? And I think that's such an important thing. And you can hear that in older music. I obviously don't want to get into like, old school was better, and because it wasn't. But I think that there's just so much more to choose from now that these kind of passion moments, these like little happy accidents and stuff, get drowned out by a lot of the sterile stuff.
How does one stand out in a crowd now when the scene, everybody wants to be a DJ, everybody wants to be a producer. How can somebody stand out from everybody else?
Oh, it's such a difficult one. I think, what you and I do on YouTube is a great idea. I think that is starting to get a little bit saturated. So I wouldn't say it's a good idea for anybody to do that exactly, but think in that context, like think outside the box,
Mm-hmm.
What can you do that's not just making tracks,
mm-hmm.
that's going to get people to notice your tracks? For example, I don't know if it's going to be like baking croissants on Instagram or painting murals on TikTok or whatever it is, and then using your tracks as a backtrack or whatever. I think nowadays the market for music is not only so saturated that there's so much choice for people to choose from that you really have to sort of package yourself in a new way, but I think it's also got to do with the fact that now with the internet, everyone is so connected. For me, as a listener of people's music, I want to know what that person is like. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I want to know that I'm not listening to music that's made by who I feel is an asshole or whatever. I don't know. Yep. And I think a lot of people are like that. They want to make sure that they want to know who that is that's behind the music. And I think that's important in this era of music that we're in, is to have that connection with your audience so that they can kind of see who you are beyond just the music.
Yeah, so it's like
because also there's so many names. I mean, now if you go buy music, it's like, what do you choose? There's so many names. It's like people will generally choose like the kind of name that they know that's stuck into their head. And the easiest way to stick into somebody's head is by doing something a bit different, paint a mural and put your backtrack on there or whatever.
Yeah, I always used to walk into the music shop and pick music based upon the album artwork. But these days, fuck man, I'm sick of seeing in particular Psytrance album artwork, because none of it really catches my eye anymore. It all seems to like, specifically it's like a template, like
that's how I used to faded and faces and
that's how I discovered bands like Behemoth. That's why I started listening to like Slipknot. Like I just looked at the album cover and I was like, oh shit, that looks cool. I didn't know who any of these bands were before I actually listened to them, and after picking their album in the shop. But yeah, I don't choose music like that anymore. And I guess what you're alluding to is that we're sort of building more of like personality as well as brand around the music that has, that can be eye-catching or attention-grabbing for an audience. And I'm similar to, I don't want to listen to music from made by somebody who's a bit of a douche. And unfortunately, I suffer from the problem of like when I hear that, you hear the rumors of what Michael Jackson was up to. It's like, I can't really listen to Michael Jackson's music anymore. I know that there's arguments against that. People say like you should separate the art from the artist and blah, blah, blah. But I feel like they're one and the same for the way that I interact with them. So
I guess it depends, I guess it depends. If it's, for example, somebody who's like commenting on certain things, then maybe, but I feel like, on that level, there's kind of no excusability. You can't separate the artist from the person on that level, But I mean, if it was, for example, somebody singing about, who wrote a song about Michael Jackson, like, for example, like Eminem, I'm not a huge fan, but he often gets called out for certain things that he says, like about Michael Jackson, for example. And I think him commenting on it, I think is part of creating the discussion. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think he's excused, but I don't think Michael Jackson is excused from his actions,
On the Psytrance Producers Forum today, I saw that a chap posed a question about approaching labels, and I see that you replied to it. But I'm going to actually ask you that question here because I think it goes hand in hand with what we're talking about. Like, how does somebody get any sort of recognition? Do you believe that if an artist, I'm going to ask you this question. So it's based upon the question that he asked, but do you think an artist can just focus on making the best music possible and still get somewhere without a network, without like all the contacts and that sort of thing?
I think it depends, I think the network is just going to drive the success of such an artist more. I think people can create music and live a totally happy life. Maybe they're not looking for that kind of huge success or something like that. But I think having, or at least creating a network is the most important thing like one can do. And it's going to do a lot more for an artist than any label will do, I think. Because yeah.
Do you think that like the idea of a label is sort of becoming maybe even a little obsolete these days?
I think so. I think, there's still like some labels that I'll work with, but I think it's specifically on a kind of moral level. Like, for example, I released a track which was like on a VA for charity and that kind of thing. So I'll work with labels who are doing that kind of thing. But the general kind of like the rat race for Beatport charts and that kind of thing, I think it's such a toxic environment for artists. And I've kind of seen it for myself. I've had releases that have charted on Beatport and never seen a cent and that kind of thing. So, and that specific release, I even had to pay for the mastering for it. So it was like I actually lost money on the release.
Dude.
And I think, if we go, I know, right? If we go back to like 20 years ago, the label's kind of job was to front the money so that the artist could master, get it thing mixed if he didn't mix it himself, and then get it printed onto CD and then distributed. Then CD came out of the picture, and the label basically became the person who fronts the money for the mastering and the distribution. And slowly but surely, each link in the chain has kind of disappeared, where they said, okay, now you have to pay for the mastering. And now it's like, you got to pay for distribution. You got to have your own network chain and everything. And now the labels are only looking for artists who already have like 10K followers and stuff. It's like, what are they going to add to that an artist hasn't already built for themselves, I think. And if we're at the point where you've got to front your own mastering, and then they're still saying like, I don't like this track, recreate this thing. It's like, what are we actually doing here? We're making music that we don't want to make and not making a cent out of it and still working our butts off. And then we still have to promote it ourselves and sponsor posts on Facebook ourselves. It's like, it doesn't work like that. I think at the point where somebody, especially nowadays, can create their own following to the point where a label is recognizing them, that they don't need the label anymore. And I think it's such a difficult thing to get into that label that they kind of expect that level of, it's weird.
What about like booking agencies? Do you think there's still sort of like, obviously they can solve like logistical problems in terms of like, booking travel and this sort of thing if you're going overseas and negotiating, and gives you a level of professionalism. But how do you feel?
I think booking agencies, that's a bit of a different story. Although now things might be quite a bit different. I'm not sure how many booking agencies still exist. But I think the need for a booking agency is more important than a label, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So because of the fact that like for example, if somebody wants to book me in England, I don't have any contacts there, or maybe a few, but like they would have to be the one that's going to organize me the gigs and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, now as an independent artist, it's so hard to get to the point where the booking agency is going to recognize you as a viable source of income. And if they do, I think things are so desperate now that you're probably going to get rinsed for what you're worth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right to say that you'd be surprised to know how many booking agents are still around. But I guess they don't have too many overhead costs, so I guess they can kind of continue where they left off once festivals come back. Do you think that we will see festivals come back the way that they were? Do you think that there's...
I think it'll take a while. I mean, I think, of course, people will still be like nervous and stuff to go. And, like I said, in South Africa, we're very, very far behind with like the vaccination program. And so I think to go back to where it was before will still take a while, but things are slowly starting to open up a little bit, here locally at least, with like government regulations, like allowing bigger and bigger gatherings. Personally, I probably still like fend off for a while. And, if local bookings contacted me, I'd probably still not do it until I at least have the vaccine, just so that I don't put anyone else's life at risk,
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it'll still be a while here locally. A few people I've spoken to in Europe as well, things are going pretty slowly there. So, I mean, it looks like we might still be where we are for another year or so until things start to look like they were in the scene again.
Yeah. I mean, Boom just recently announced that they were postponing until 2022. There was a party here called Esoteric that was supposed to run in March that got postponed till the end of the year. And there's a few that are going to be taking place, but Australia's been, all over the show in terms of, it's just a roller coaster everywhere. So I guess the sooner that we can get the vaccine to people, it seems like it's rolling out here pretty quickly. So that's positive. I actually don't even know how I go about getting it at all. I need to look into that. But
I think how it works here in South Africa is like, it depends on like what you do. So people that work, obviously the doctors are going to get first, and then people who work in retail and that kind of thing. There's like sectors of people. Unfortunately, somebody who like myself, I'm very low risk. I sit in my studio all day, so I'll probably be like right at the end of the list. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, you self-isolate just because of your job description.
It's my daily life, yeah.
Coming back to what we were talking about before with the... I wanted to ask you, what would you say your strengths or weaknesses are in terms of production? Like, do you sort of identify what parts that you would like to work on and what parts you feel like you excel in?
I think my biggest weakness is like decision making. So being able to know like when to move on. So I think often it's something that I stress so much on my channel not to do, but I think it's because if anybody knows from experience, it's me, because I suffer from it the most, but yeah, I struggle with like finalizing the decision, like, okay, this is what it's going to be. So the thing that's kind of helped me with that is just rendering a lot of stuff to audio.
Yeah.
So it's like the decision is made. I can't go back on it. It's done. So that's something that's helped, because of that in itself is a workflow crippler. I'll have tracks open for years that'll never get finished because it's like, I can't decide whether I want this formant or this acid lead. Like, you know what I mean?
Do you often like run into those sorts of problems where you just really don't know what the right decision is for the track?
Yeah, man. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And then often it'll get to the point where I'm like, okay, no, it is this one. And then I'll listen to it the next day and I'll be like, I should have changed it back. Do you know what I mean? So like then often like I'll be like, oh, I've been faffing about this too long. So then I'll make a kind of hasty decision just to get it over with. And then often I feel like that hasty decision has kind of like stepped me back a little bit, because now maybe I can't fine tune it or whatever. You know what I mean?
Do you have like quite a bit of music that you're working on at the moment for like an upcoming album or release or anything like that?
So this is actually something super interesting. I heard it on the Mr. Bill podcast. Do you listen to that?
I've listened to a few episodes, but I'm not a religious follower.
Okay, so yeah, I'm quite a religious follower of the Bill podcast. But anyway,
the Bill.
He's doing something. I think he's mentioned in one of his more recent-ish podcasts. He's doing what he calls a project stock take.
Okay.
Where he creates an Excel spreadsheet, and every single Ableton project on his computer, he puts like the details, how far along in the process it is, whether it's a work in progress or still needs to mix or master, whatever, the BPM, the key, like populates this list of every single project, and then one by one goes through them and says, okay, this one's 70% done. It literally just needs maybe 3 hours work, and then it's complete. And I've been doing something similar where I've like opened up an Excel spreadsheet, opened up every Cubase project, and trying to like wade my way through this kind of like cesspool of unfinished projects. And the most worrying thing is I figured out I have over 50 projects that are still open, like unfinished.
What the hell? Holy shit.
Yeah, man. So
oh, whoa, that's
problem.
serious.
But the other thing is because sometimes I'll start a project like, okay, somebody's asking for an Aja style tutorial, and the music that I make is not specifically in Aja style. So I'll start making a track, and then it'll be like, it doesn't really fit my vibe. So I've got open projects that maybe just need to be tweaked into a bit more of a glitch sound, if that makes sense, and all sorts of stuff like that. But then having this kind of thing, this like list of like, okay, now this one just needs to be mixed. This one just needs a new hook, or some of them, it was like the track is finished, but it was like the bass line was made in some old plugin that I don't use anymore or something. So the track is done and sounds good. It just needs a bass line. You know what I mean? But I'll be like, I'll put that off because I don't know that that's the only thing that needs to be done. Does that make sense? So creating this like stock take list was like one of the most powerful workflow things I've ever done. Because I was like, okay, this just needs like something simple, and this just needs something simple. So
That's
I'm not talking
amazing.
about all Cytron stuff, by the way. There's like techno projects in there. There was down tempo projects in there. So it was a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, but that's amazing because you can
really...
really...
The biggest workflow tweak, I think, is that little putting everything into a table, and then also the keys and stuff, because often, and the BPMs, because then it can be like, this project has a nice lead or hook, and this project is a nice track, but it needs a lead and a hook, and they're in the same tempo and key. Fancy that, you know what I mean? And then just, now it's one project. Now I've got 49 projects to go, you know?
That's an amazing approach. I mean, I've done that. I haven't done it in a spreadsheet, but I've like written down like, I've got this track and kind of estimated how far along the process it is. But yeah, to keep it like as a like updated and that's a brilliant way to kind of look from the top down at what you need to work on and how far away from like achieving sort of finished tracks you are. That's
man.
really
and the best
brilliant.
thing about it is, I'm sure you get those days where it's like, I'm just not feeling creative today. And then you get those days where it's like, I'm feeling creative today. Being able to see like, okay, this project needs creativity, or this one needs technical ability. Like being able to like go exactly there when you need to, or know where to go. Like, okay, today I'm feeling creative. Let me work on this track that needs a hook, you know, or today I'm not feeling creative. Let me just mix this track. And then you can see which track needs to be mixed, open it up, and you're done. You know what I mean? I'd often spend like, open up a project, wait for it to load for 5 minutes or whatever. And then by the time it's opened, you get to listen to it. And now you kind of like feel like doing something else, you know?
Yeah, that Mr. Bill has so many amazing tips. How did you get on to Mr. Bill? Because obviously like all of his YouTube stuff is Ableton related. Did you find a lot of like interesting shit, even though it was in the context of Ableton?
Absolutely. I actually enjoy watching Ableton content because it allows me to kind of like think of problems that haven't come up in Cubase and try to solve them. So I'm just trying to think of examples. You know, Seamless is another. He was like the original that inspired me to start doing what I'm doing. And he's Fruity Loops, you know what I mean? Seeing how he analyzed like a Skrillex track and said, okay, look at these harmonics. And this bass must be tuned differently to the low frequencies and weird things like that. Seeing how he like looked at the spectrums and the spectrographs and like piecing part sounds that way was super inspiring to me. But also, you know, just like everything, Mr. Bull has this one, actually quite a recent video where he talks how to make, it tells you how to make a sine wave sound fatter without making it sound distorted, but it's by applying like a slight wavefold on it. And doing that to kicks, it's like, makes it sound like so much more present, you know what I mean? And it doesn't add this kind of like distorted kind of factor and stuff like that. So, and the greatest thing is like Vital has wavefolding built in, you know, into the wavetable editor. So just open up basic shapes, sine wave, wavefold a little bit, Bob's your uncle.
Fuck yeah. I remember watching Mr. Bill when I was a newbie and looking how fast he would like go through Ableton and being so intimidated by how quickly he could use the software and thinking like, fuck, I'm never going to get to that point. And now like people say the same thing to me, like, how do you work so fast? Or, you know, I don't work anywhere near as fast as what he works, but still he fucking plays Ableton like it's a video game. It's crazy. Yeah, he's such a huge inspiration. Are there other like big YouTubers out there that have had a big sort of impact on you?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me think of ones like outside of kind of psytrance and that kind of thing though. So just trying to think now. There was Andrew Huang is really good. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that surname correctly, because I really enjoy his kind of like abstract approach to creating sounds and videos. So a lot of the time, like YouTube is full of like how to make a Skrillex bass, and I'm guilty of how to make the asterisk sound. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So whereas he's like how to make a song using only bricks of Lego. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like brilliant, you know, fucking brilliant. I love that kind of like thinking outside the box, you know?
Yeah.
I think that's super inspiring, especially like it's the stuff he makes is so out of the realm of what we like, what psychedelic music is. But I feel like so many things that he does can be so well received by people. But he's also a bit of he's a bit of a strange character. So I feel like a lot of people kind of look at him and judge him, and they don't take what he's doing seriously, but he's so fucking good, you know?
Yeah. I've really enjoyed his videos for sure. And in terms of sort of, I look up to him in the sense that he's been able to kind of make a YouTube channel where it's educational, but like you said, it's abstract, but then also it's built around his personality in a way that gives him a lot of freedom for the kind of content that he can make. That I feel like my videos are like, they're sit down and watch me point at things in Ableton. You know, it's not like I'm up and around my house and like doing interesting things to, I could start doing that, and I could try and go in that direction. But I look up to him for that, because it's totally a way different format to the kind of more sterile approach that I take. But there's a place for everything. Like people need those proper sit down tutorials of like how to approach this software or this synth.
Absolutely. I think the beauty of like that kind of thing is it brings people who might not be into music production. Like say, for example, somebody who's like into photography or videography or whatever. They're like, yo, this video is good. And then they see this guy experimenting with synths, and they're like, what is a synth? You know what I mean? And then they download Ableton, and then they find Collective Intelligence, and they're like, what is psytrance? And now they're like hooked on psytrance. Dude, it's happened. I've had people that never heard of psytrance before. They just downloaded Cubase because they wanted to like record guitar, and then they found my channel, and now they're like addicted to psytrance. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we're responsible for a lot of that, I'm sure, around the world.
Yeah.
There's so many like Americans that tune into Collective Intelligence that probably have not really ever encountered psytrance before, or at least not really given it a chance, but through the channel and through the live streams have like really gotten into it, which is super cool. And people of all sorts of ages.
Though, the scene in America is pretty big. I mean, there's like pockets. I think because USA is such a big country that it's hard to have like a big scene overall, if you know what I mean. But there's pockets, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I got a few more questions for you before we have to finish up. So, if you have the ultimate choice, would you take a hardware synth or a digital synth?
So, do you mean like if I could design like the perfect synth for myself, would it be hardware or would it be software? Or
if you needed to make the ultimate sound and you had the choice of using a hardware synth to make it or like a software synth to make it, what road would you, which path would you take?
I guess it depends. If somebody was like, make this specific sound, then I'd probably go with a modular. Just because I like the way it kind of confines the boundaries. If you know what I mean, it's like you can't put 100 OTTs on there to get a disperser effect. You know what I mean? You're limited. So I I like that about it. But if somebody was like, sit down and recreate the weirdest thing you've ever heard, then I'll probably open up something like Faceplant, because I know that I can just keep adding things and just keep going. And do you know what I mean? So if somebody was like, create a sound, there's no limitations, there's no rules, I probably use software just because it's like the canvas to explore can be so much more expansive, but it's also just because like the hardware stuff that I have might not allow for certain things, you know, like frequency shifting, for example, or, you know.
What is your favorite Psytrance tune?
Such a difficult one. I'd probably have to say like one of my old school, like one of the ones that kind of like stuck with me for years, a track by an artist called Artifact, and the track is called Nosferatu.
Okay, yeah. We'll have to pop that in the...
If you listen to it now, like it's the production is like a little bit, you know, chunky and edgy, but the ideas in the track and the melodic sequence and the arrangement and the way that it kind of like creates this tension and then has this final like... It was like, that was, we say in South Africa, the norma, like the number. For so many years, like when that track played, it was like, now it's nighttime, you know what I mean?
It's on.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, we'll have to put that a link to that track in the description. Dash, where can people find, first of all, obviously your YouTube channel? They can just type in the search Dash Glitch, but how can they find your preset packs? How can they find you on social media, et cetera, et cetera?
So I'm not too active on all the social medias and stuff. I do have a Facebook page, but to be honest, like I'm not really active. So the easiest way to kind of get in touch is through YouTube, or to shoot me an email, my details on YouTube. But with questions and stuff like that, like the easiest way is to like tune into one of my live streams, and I'll generally respond instantly. I do get a lot of like emails of people asking questions of stuff that I've already showed in videos, so it's difficult to respond to all of those, like sending links out and stuff. So for like the sound design requests and stuff like that, I generally like try to get people to actually tune in and ask like live. But I mean, for any types of requests, like whether a pack will work in a certain version of a plugin, and I'll generally reply instantly. Yep. So all my sound packs and stuff are on my Shopify page. Hopefully I can send you the link. You can put it in the description here. Yep.
Yeah, I'll chuck it in the description for sure. Yep.
Cool.
Perfect. Dash, thank you so much for coming on the Collective Intelligence podcast. Unfortunately, we've only got time today for about an hour and a half, so we'll have to stop here, but I will definitely have to get you back for a longer chat. So thank you so much, dude. It's been a pleasure.
Cool, man. Thank you for having me.